Well, hello, you're watching Great Conversations. My name is Butch Porter, and we're here with Mel Pine. And Mel Pine is the Virginia director. What's the term? What's the
coordinator? They call me.
Virginia coordinator for Better Angels.
And West Virginia too.
Oh, he added on West Virginia. Good for him. Well, next the world.
My empire expands.
So look, so I want to talk a little bit about Better Angels today. I met Mel many years ago through the Chamber of Commerce here in Loudoun County. He was a web developer and amongst other things, and we were out of touch for a long time. Then all of a sudden his name kept popping up, and I went to a workshop, or I helped organize a workshop here at INDED. We're at INDED today, Independent Education here in downtown Leesburg. So tell us a little bit about Better Angels. Let's start there.
Better Angels is a citizens-based, grassroots-up organization that started immediately after the 2016 elections.
Why after that election? I mean, what significance could that election have possibly?
Some guy, a guy in New York called a guy in Ohio, and the guy in New York said, "Everyone's here is depressed. It's like, there's been a death,
Like a death.
And the guy in Ohio said, everybody here is celebrating. And they said, well, you know what? Why don't we get both sides together to talk about it?
Oh, okay.
And that was the start of Better Angels.
I remember when I first moved to Virginia, this is how childish and naive I can sometimes be when I'm at my best. I went to a Republican meeting, and I'm like, do you guys ever have mixers with Democrats? And I was serious, right? To me, it seems like a rational thing. Like every once in a while, we'll have a little social event where we can, be adults and have and they all laughed at me like I was absolutely crazy, and I was extremely crazy to think that's even a thing. Right?
Well, I was born in 1946, so growing up in the 50s and 60s, it was very common. It was much more common.
Well, no, but to have like a committee mixing with the Republican committee meeting with the local Republican committee meeting with the local Democrat committee. I mean they might
get together.
But Democrats and Republicans definitely spend time with each other, and it's become more tribal now. I think there's a lot of studies out that politics is now trumping race and religion and almost everything else when it comes to how people identify. So it's a good time for something like this. So tell me a little bit more how it works.
Well, currently, I mean, we're working on some new formats, but currently, I'd say our signature event is what we call the RedBlue Workshop. It's a full day of equal numbers of reds and blues, 5 to 7 of each is what we aim for. And it's a carefully designed, really well designed, and tightly monitored. So you've got moderators who keep people conforming to the rules. And it's a day of exercises that where reds and blues don't really talk directly to each other till late in the day.
Right.
There are a bunch of exercises that have them able to observe each other and learn from each other.
Fishbowl exercise.
Fishbowl is one of them that everybody remembers. The stereotypes exercise is another. You start with the stereotypes exercise where the two groups are separate and they're each working on what are the stereotypes against us that we don't like.
Sure.
What's the real story about those? What's our defense against those? But then, what's the kernel of truth in the stereotype?
Right, because sometimes there's at least an element of truth.
Sure,
in
there's
a
always.
stereotype.
I think there's almost always an element of truth to stereotypes.
Sure.
And then they come together and share what they learned.
Right.
So it's separate. We're not putting them together yet.
Right.
And the next one is the fishbowl, where one group sits inside, let's say blues, and the reds are outside.
Right.
Then it's reversed. And the questions are, what is it about your side? And I'll put that in quotes because, like you, I'm not entirely comfortable with the binary nature of all this. But let's get back to that. But the questions are, what is it about your side's views and ideals that you think are good for the nation?
Okay.
And then what is it about them that gives you concern?
Okay.
Not that you're not going to win the election, but concern that you're heading not in a direction everybody's. And then you switch, and everybody gets the instruction for the people on the outside is really to listen.
Right.
And
right.
afterwards, in the comments you get, you'll hear people say, I never really listened before.
Sure.
I was always busy formulating what I was going to say next.
Right. So do you, in talking to people about Better Angels, do you find people who don't want to label themselves either way?
Yes, people who don't want to label themselves either way, and especially on the red side, moderate Republicans who don't want to be labeled the same way as the Trump wing, and
Sure.
and the National Party leadership right now.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny. Those used to be separate,
Yes.
right? Those used to be
Yeah.
in competition. Now that's not the case anymore. So, but when it comes to the labels, I mean, just putting Better Angels to the side just for a second, do you think that the labels sort of reinforces itself? Do we have a tendency to say, well, you're a red and I'm a blue, and thus we have to speak in these adversarial terms, and
Yeah.
you know?
I know what you're getting at. It's a paradox that
That's
in order to
Yeah,
in
it is
order
that.
to run these events, we have to have
to
some
keep it
kind
balanced.
of nomenclature.
Yeah,
And
it's
yet-
the balance you're
and-
concerned
and,
about.
I mean, at one of the recent workshops, one of the Reds constantly was saying, I don't like these labels. There's not one side and another. We're all
Right.
individuals. Now, I'm on his side.
Sure, no,
And
I believe
I
that.
noticed the moderators, as the day went on, started to back off from talking about your side and the other side.
Sure.
And that's a big thing of mine. We got to start seeing each other as individuals. So it
do.
is a kind of a
I think labels are useful, and for me, and I've said this a lot, is that labels are useful for ideas. Like, I think isms are not unuseful. I think we talk about, communism or fascism or socialism or capitalism, and those things. Did you see my post today? Capitalism. It's like a successories thing. It's capitalism forming all other isms since 4000 BC. That's
I'll have to take a look.
it's one of my favorite isms. But no, I think labels are important for ideas. I think they're less useful for people, right? I mean, I believe in capitalism. I don't call myself a capitalist, but
that's fine. That's fine.
right?
You don't look much like a capitalist.
I
either.
don't, do I? Yeah. I don't know. Bourgeoisie is probably something I would be very comfortable with if that was a term that we use now. When are we going to bring that back? I think we should bring bourgeoisie.
Aspire to bourgeoisie.
Well, the problem is the bourgeoisie is mostly of the left now, right? I mean, that's kind of
Yeah,
the thing.
I can see that.
The heights of culture in the United States are more of a lefty thing, so it wouldn't work. But but seriously, I mean, when we talk about these labels and we label each other we label people as an ism or you, a lot of times it has to do with attaching people not necessarily to ideas, but it's attaching them to other people, right? So you love Trump, or you listen to Fox News, or you think that Rush Limbaugh hung the moon, or that's what happens. We kind of label people by associating them with other people. And I can't think of anybody on the planet other than maybe me on most good days that I agree with, right? All the time.
I often say, if I can find anybody agree with me, I'll start a party.
That's right. I mean, it's not really, it's the labeling with other people that I think has always been a challenge. But the red versus blue thing, in Better Angels' defense, I think the thing is that it's the only way to know that there's going to be some balance.
Yeah,
right? That's the main challenge.
Yeah, I personally would prefer right and left. Red and blue.
I'm kind of getting away from that too. You know why? Because I think the right versus left thing, in my humble opinion, all my opinions are humble, Mel. You know that about me already. I've
noticed.
I think the right versus left thing is an old sort of lefty thing. I think the right versus left thing is fascist versus communist, fighting over the same totalitarian bone. Now, conservatives have their own right versus left. It's called, Edmund Burke and Thomas Paine.
Right.
That's a whole different discussion. So I stopped, and thank you, Donald Trump, for having me not want to call myself right wing anymore. I haven't called myself right wing since then. So I basically have decided that conservatives And, we're checking out of the whole right versus left thing. We have our own right versus left. And I have a lot of discussions with libertarians about the role of government and, morals, all those sorts of things. But the whole communist versus fascist thing, we won't know, the conservatives won't know part of it.
Yeah,
I don't think we really have much to do with it, frankly.
Yeah, I just think of it as every point in time, there's a political spectrum.
That's right.
So
yeah.
where
It's a
we
snapshot.
are right now,
Yep.
the spectrum goes from, on the left, let's say from moderate liberal, and on the right, moderate Republican, more solid Republican. But the right encompasses, well, both sides, but the right especially encompasses like libertarians, for example,
Sure.
who don't really fit
They
in
don't.
a right-left.
They really
I
don't.
mean, I consider myself in many ways a libertarian.
Right, you're a
with
capitalist
with a small
with a
L,
small C,
not,
right?
not
Yeah.
the Libertarian Party. But,
Sure.
But I tend to look at any particular issue that comes up. One of my first questions is about individual liberty.
Sure. And so you would fall on the Thomas Paine side, of
Right.
the Edmund Burke Thomas Paine side. I've spent a lot of time on the Paine side, and have found myself more on the Burke side,
Yeah.
especially in the life, and that involves having a family and being midlife crises and things like that.
Yeah, but knowing you, I mean, you love the big historic, philosophical.
Sure.
And
that's a Burkish
I'm more,
sort of thing.
Yeah, and I'm more like right here. It
Right
keeps
now.
it keeps shifting, and the words just don't work the way they used to.
Yeah.
So I'll give up and just call it right and left for now. But
Sure. Yeah. Well, what's funny is that the U.S. has been fairly unique in that our conservatives have been limited government, right? And in most of the world, conservative doesn't necessarily mean limited government. It means a lot of things we do mean by conservatism, family values, and and things like that. But it doesn't. In most parts of the world, it doesn't necessarily mean. It means traditionalist. It doesn't mean limited government. The U.S. has been unique, and it's really just the last about 60 years where the classical liberals and the traditionalist conservatives kind of got together to fight communism. That was sort of the third leg of the stool that sort of propped up the conservative movement for, like I said, about 60 years. And it was communism, and now we don't. I mean, that's not as much of a uniting factor. And so now you have libertarians and conservatives that are fighting with each other all the time, like tooth and nail about role of government. But anyway, all that to say, I just don't, the whole fascist versus communist thing, right versus left, that's a Nietzsche Marx thing that's been around for a long time. Most conservatives want nothing to do with it. I mean, most conservatives will say that fascism is a leftist thing, and there's some truth to that. And then, but for me, I think it doesn't even apply to someone who believes in limited government, rule of law. I don't think the left really, most of the leftists that I know, most liberals that I know, I'm not going to say leftists, but most liberals that I know don't consider themselves part of that fascist versus communist fight either, right? I mean, so to me, I think it's become kind of weird. But the challenge that you're having now, from what I'm gathering with the Better Angels thing, is getting Reds. So why is it harder to get Reds involved? I mean, I have some theories, but
well, I mean, there are a lot of theories. I mean, one is, of course, that they suspect they're going to walk into an atmosphere of disorder and chaos, and they're going to get called names.
Sure. Because that happens to us sometimes.
Yeah, and that, and there are a bunch of other reasons, but I'm starting to feel like one, and I also think that because we work hard to have equal balance between Reds and Blues in everything we do, but fail in a lot of ways in leadership, and that the culture kind of maybe uses some language sometimes that doesn't get through to Reds as well. But I'm also coming to believe, and you'll like this, that it's the red and blue labels, because that's part of it. Because I mean, those labels traditionally were used on on election night, like tonight,
That's
it's going
right.
to be
What
election
was it,
night.
2000?
We've got,
Or
you know,
2004,
the
they
red state,
switched.
and they all have these maps with red states, blue states.
right.
Then you had the Obama speech about we're not going to have a red America and a blue America, but one, you know, and the red and blue are attached to political parties. I mean, my
Right.
wife last night asked me, "You're calling yourself a red in Better Angels?" And we've got.
I wasn't going to broach that topic, but
that's,
I'm happy
that's
to.
okay. We don't have to go deep into it, but I've decided I'm more comfortable with
Right. Center right.
red. Yeah, I'm in the middle somewhere.
The libertarian thing,
and I'm different. I have very different in terms of the right-left spectrum that I talk about. I'm way over here. That's not left, but to the left.
Stage right.
Well, it's stage left.
That's right.
Stage right, you're left, right.
Sure.
But I'm way to the left on some issues like immigration. I'm
Sure.
way to the right on some issues like identity politics and putting people into boxes and treating them a certain way because
treating people like individuals and not groups has
Right.
been a thing of the right.
Right.
Really. I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
Using the term loosely.
And
Yeah.
there are there are exceptions, but yeah.
Sure.
But it's definitely on the right to say no. It's just wrong to think about we treat blacks a certain way and Hispanics a certain way and whites a certain way and whites, you know.
You can only say that because you're a white guy, though, right? I mean, isn't that the way that goes? I'm joking.
Well,
but
I know. I'm not supposed to say it because I'm a
right.
white guy. I shouldn't
That's
be
right.
saying it.
That's right.
But
But then that's the challenge, right? I mean, that's part of the challenge. There's things you can and can't say because.
Well, yeah, and I'm okay. If you want, I'm way over to what would be called right on
Freedom of speech.
What's the term? Politically correct language.
Right,
yeah.
right. Yeah, it's interesting to me that the freedom of speech movement was a very left of center thing in the 60s. And now
Right.
it's
now
completely
it's
completely the other way around.
Now it's right wing. I had an experience myself where I was labeled a certain way, and I was labeled a racist by my
Right.
religion, and my things I had written 17 years earlier were ejected from the database of acceptable stuff because I couldn't possibly be an actual loving person based on an objection I had to a process that happened. So I know a little bit about, I've experienced in a microcosm.
Right.
I've experienced what some of, what's the name of the guy who wrote the curve,
The bell curve?
The bell curve.
Yeah.
He's one of those people that gets, protested on college campuses.
Oh, sure. And, you mean Murray?
Murray,
Charles Murray,
yeah. And people haven't read what he actually wrote.
That's right. Because not everything he wrote was on that.
And there was one small part of one
one tiny little thing
that people object to.
And he gets a lot of heat. Actually, the whole Berkeley riots were started for the most part. Murray and of course, the other guy.
Yeah, they're. Stephen Pinker is one of the people that I
Christine Hoff
think
Summers
highly of.
is another one that gets harassed.
The professor at a college out in Washington State or Oregon State who didn't like the idea of having a blacks only day on campus.
Oh yes.
Yeah, all these people. I have a lot of sympathy or empathy.
Yeah, well, he's a liberal people. Too. It's not like
he's a liberal. Yeah,
it's not like he's some conservative professor. Right?
No, and so I'm very right on with the idea of free. Hey, I'll give you, and I'm even in favor of allowing a baker to.
Oh sure. Right of association in a sense.
To not do labor for something he or she doesn't believe in. He's required to sell anything off the shelf.
That's right.
But that's my feeling. But that's why I'm scattered all over the place. I get you. Anyway, I decided to be red in Better Angels. because I'm more comfortable
'Cause it gives
talking
it gives
with
you that
people
much
like
more
with
power.
people like you. It gives me more power.
That's right.
But it gives me. I'm a protected class.
That's right. You're
I've joined
I didn't want to use the words.
I've joined a protected class. But
Well
I'm
done.
more comfortable having conversations with people like you than some people on
the far
who
left,
call themselves
especially.
progressives. But
Well, in my opinion, conservatives are the real progressives, the real liberals, the real moderates, the real pragmatists, the real centrists. I mean, to me, conservatism, from my point of view, is a way of looking at the world. It's a way of thinking about things, and it's prudence is a facet of conservatism.
Okay.
Now that's a very Burkean approach.
That's one I
Prudence
I
is
fall,
not your
fall,
thing.
fall on the wayside by.
Prudence is not your thing.
I'm not the most prudent guy.
Well, so I think so. So you left the church you were at. So are you a Buddhist now?
Well,
is that
I've
the
been a
thing?
Buddhist. Yeah, I've been.
How long has that been?
35 years.
Oh my
so.
gosh, okay.
I was attending, or I was an active member of Unitarian Universalist
okay.
churches.
But you consider yourself a
and
Buddhist then?
they supported me in Unitarian Universalism tends to do that.
Sure.
But I've kind of given up the Unitarian Universalist side and just call myself a Buddhist now.
Yeah. So do you find that in the growing of the Better Angels in Virginia, do you find that I guess if you get away from DC, is it hard to find blues in the in the hinterlands and in the more rural areas? Have you gotten there very very much, or is it always been kind of in the cities?
We haven't had a lot of success. We haven't got a lot. I mean, we just started. A year and a half ago.
Sure.
And we haven't got a lot of penetration in the rural areas. We would like to have more. We need organizers, red and blue organizers, what we call red and blue organizers,
Sure.
to get something started. And we are having some successes there. But where I live is a pretty red area,
yeah.
the west side of
Loudoun County. Yeah.
And it is still much easier to
still
find blues than reds. Yeah.
Yeah, they're moving west.
Because the red, well, it's not just that. Yes, they are moving west. But I mean, I know I have a lot of red friends, and they just don't want to do this.
Yeah, I can shed a little light on that. Yeah, you actually have already said it. We're afraid to be called names. The challenge is that most people I know, what I would like to consider the conservatives, pseudo intellectuals. We'd like to consider ourselves intellectuals, even though we don't have the training or the knowledge or the skill set. We like to think of ourselves as champions of ideas. Right? We're concerned about ideas, and when you start with the red blue labels, you're already outside of the world of ideas, and you're in the world of politics. And that's one of the reasons we do what we do, is that if you start with the ideas, I think that then it makes it easier to find sort of that common ground. I talk to blues all the time, and one of the first things we almost have to do is, like, what do we agree on, right? What do we agree on? Let's start with that. And that requires, I was just talking to our students today in civics, it requires looking at those institutions, right? What are the institutions that make for a prosperous society, right? And it's rule of law, it's property rights, it's those kind of simple basic things. And if you find out that you disagree on some of those, which some people are not fans of property rights, I mean, that's literally a thing, right? I mean, it's not as important. The Democratic Socialists of America are seeking to get to a point where private property is not that important anymore. They want to kind of get to that world, and I think that's a dangerous thing. And that's why if you find out that that's your area of disagreement, then you can just kind of put that to the side and talk about something else, because you're not going to get past that. But if you find that you do have this agreement on something basic, like rule of law and property rights, or family, or name an institution that you think is useful and helpful for a prosperous society. Once you find those areas of agreement, then I think it's easier to say, okay, well, maybe we agree on what we're trying to accomplish. Maybe. Not always, but maybe we do. But maybe we just don't agree on the right way to get there.
Methods to get there.
So then you look at, okay, maybe there's some data out there, right? Maybe this stuff's been tried before. And what happens is conservatives will find themselves moving all the way past, because we're making assumptions with people that we think are decent people. We all want to get to, okay, but here's the data. And then, but if you rush to that, then that causes its own problems, because then
Right.
you're looking at numbers, you're not looking at people, and
Right.
it's this whole
And
thing.
numbers, everybody's got different numbers.
you can make-
everybody looks at the same numbers different ways.
You know what Mark Twain said, right? It was you got lies, damn lies, and statistics. That's right. Well, look, I really appreciate you coming today. I had a really great time. We could
Thank
talk.
you. I did too.
We
can
could
go on
talk for
forever.
3 hours, but we try to cut it off at 25 or 30. But yeah, so your website is better-angels.org, correct?
better-angels.org. Right?
Hyphen. Okay, well, correct my grammar. I'm all for it.
I'm a former copy editor.
Are you really? Yeah, no, that doesn't shock me at all. But better-angels.org, not Better Angles, because that's the geometry website. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, there is some other, but there's also the Better Angels Virginia Facebook group.
That's right. So
Better
join that.
Angels
Anybody that's on
Virginia.
our Great Conversations page here in Loudoun County, you should definitely join the Better. They have good discussions on there. We try to avoid discussions on Great Conversations because we want people to get together in person, like always. But I really enjoyed you coming in, and those who are watching, please go have a great conversation.